If you had a loved one that had passed, or you wanted to create a version of yourself, how could you go about doing that? Hello, and welcome back to AI Evolution, the podcast where we try and think about what's going to happen in the future and how AI is going to transform and change all of our lives. And today we are going to attempt to tackle, I suppose, quite an interesting topic that looks at creating, if you like, duplicates or replicas of ourselves or our friends and family, with the idea that you could somehow preserve that as a kind of memory for the future. So if you had a loved one that had passed, or you wanted to create a version of yourself, how could you go about doing that with the sort of current technology? And then obviously we'll think about what that might look like in the future as well. But also, think around the impact of that, the ethical considerations, the emotional impact of that, things like privacy, obviously, and consent, and applications and scenarios that we might want to use that sort of technology in as well. But before we get to any of that, we'll have our usual eye on AI, kind of think about what's been happening in the world of AI this week. So Ben, on that thought then, what's been catching your eye this week in AI?
Do you know, I've mostly been just researching the topic we've been talking about, and I've looked a little bit at some of the uses that people have been doing on DeepSeek, and just seeing how, in China, lots of people are using it for counseling or for other uses that I hadn't thought about using AI for. And I think what interested me, and I think I sent the article around to you guys earlier, just how, and I think we touched on this before with doctors, how actually AI can appear more empathetic and better trained at listening than people. And I think that, the irony of that is interesting.
Well, I mean, I think the default for a lot of human beings is they're not very good at listening. I think, often when people listen, and I certainly do this, is you're already thinking about what you're going to say next, and you're really not necessarily paying enough attention. Whereas I think with the AI systems, they're never doing that. They are actually just listening. So,
No, but interesting in those two user cases, like, medical and counselling, that people are reporting they found AI more empathetic. I mean, that's crazy, isn't it?
Well, I actually had someone on. There's a company in Cambridge who's been developing a counseling tool. And what was really interesting is when we were talking about it, and I can't remember what episode it was in my With AI podcast that I did ages ago, but but they said that it was designed for kids, and the whole point was for it to be plugged into like a social media network. And what it could do is it could recognize when somebody was exhibiting the traits of something like suicide or self-harming and that kind of thing, and it could start a conversation. It wasn't there to actually do the counseling. What it was there to do was to try and steer the person to get counseling. And I thought that was a really interesting application, because a lot of these sites have, a responsibility to try and, take care of the people that are on the platform. And if they see that type of self-harm behavior, then, they already have tools, but they're quite blunt instruments at the minute, where the AI could be a much more sophisticated way of trying to start that conversation. And a lot of times the younger people in particular found it easier to talk to an AI than a real person, because they didn't feel like they were being judged.
that's really interesting actually, because I'd heard of AI sort of spotting things perhaps like Alzheimer's early or Parkinson's, perhaps with like the tremors, being able to spot them much earlier, and it's picking up on micro traits, if you like, but that's like picking up on micro emotional traits much earlier than perhaps a human might notice them, and sort of then sort of lead to that kind of early diagnosis, which could be really super useful. Dave, anything caught your eye this week?
I think not particularly this week. I think since we've met last, I think the DeepSeek stuff has really come out. I think since we had our last conversation, and
Just
obviously all the kerfuffle that's been going on around that, and just kind of seeing the whole surprise. First of all, everybody seems absolutely shocked that this could happen, but to me it feels like the natural evolution of this. It's almost like somebody took AI and said, hey, can you build a more efficient version of yourself? And it went, yeah, sure. And and then they just keep drilling down and drilling down. And I think this is what's going to happen, evolution over evolution. And this is also the same story we've seen over and over and over again in other industries, right? You get a big company, they come in, I don't know, well, look at automotive manufacturing. You get automotive manufacturing, they come in, they've got all these great ideas, they build these massive factories, and then you get smaller companies coming in, building new types of vehicles that are much more efficient, they're much less expensive to build, the factories are more efficient, and they're building at half the price. And then some new entrant comes in and builds at half the price of that. And so to me, it's just the natural evolution of an industry, really. But can OpenAI and some of the Anthropic and some of the bigger companies that have relied on that original design, will they be able to sort of change the way that they work and adapt in sort of real time using the tools that they have to be able to make themselves more efficient? And I think this is going to be a story that's going to run probably through our conversations for the for the year for sure,
At
until
least,
we
yeah.
see what happens.
Yeah, it's been explosive, and I think that I think there was a sort of given assumption, wasn't there, probably until DeepSeek, that the Chinese were going to be sort of continuously maybe a year behind in terms of their development. Um, in actual fact, that's just blown that completely to pieces. And then, of course, because it's open source, it means other countries, other communities, other corporations can build similar models without, they're affordable, should we say? Because I think the big boys were relying on the idea that these models cost so much to do and train that that was a barrier to entry for most other countries or organizations. But what this has done is said, actually, you can do this now a lot cheaper. Sure, I am quite sure that they're leaning, they're standing on the shoulder of giants, if you like. They're leaning on what the others have already done. But hey, it's been done. It exists. And quite frankly, the big boys lent on the entire internet so they can't really complain about it either. So, and that brings me to sort of my thing, actually, which is the kind of the whole Elon Musk. I don't want to turn this into an Elon Musk podcast. That should be a whole other podcast, perhaps. But the Elon Musk Sam Altman kind of spat, because this war, if you like, isn't just as well between China and the big boys. Internally, those US companies are actually at each other's throats, really. I mean, the disdain between Musk and Altman is enormous. And the fact that this week, Musk is throwing out this 97 billion pound bid for OpenAI, hostile takeover, effectively, if you could do it. Purely, probably mostly driven to push the price of it up, because Sam wants to buy this bit himself and make it into a for-profit company, and he was throwing around the figure of 40, but he'll have to buy it at the open market price. And what Elon's done, which is quite smart, is push the open market price up to 100 billion. So overnight, and who's to say that Microsoft, Apple, somebody else doesn't come in and say, well, we'll go to 120, and suddenly it could become unaffordable for Sam Altman, unless he's got some very big backers with deep pockets who are prepared to kind of help him out. So we'll see. But yeah, it's for sure this is going to be, it's a war zone for the next 18 months minimum, maybe longer. It's going to be really interesting to watch. So,
and really interesting if someone else has another, version of AI that they're going to release, they could be inflating it to sort of cause damage as well.
Yeah. I think if you look at, so okay, I was having a conversation. I'm gonna say the T word for a minute, but let's not let that sidetrack us. But it's sort of, we were talking about Trump, and they were saying that Trump is only doing all this stuff because he wants to make money. And I'm like, Trump doesn't give a crap about money anymore. What he's doing is, it's all about his legacy. He wants to be the guy, the king. He doesn't care about the money. He wants to be the person that everybody writes in history and says Trump turned everything around. Elon, I think, is very similar. Elon doesn't care about the money. I think Elon is genuinely annoyed that this was supposed to be open source and it's now not open source, and that Altman is going to make a bunch of money by claiming that it was open source, but he's never actually made it that way. And Elon has a history. When he started Tesla, he took all of the designs of all the vehicles and made them publicly available and said, look, there's no IP here. If you want to go and make great electric vehicles, take our designs and go and make them yourself. So he walks the walk, right? And I think genuinely, because he doesn't need the money, he doesn't care. I think he really is annoyed by that, and I think that's why he's so invested in it, and he hates Altman so much. And I think, I don't know, man, I've met Altman as well, when he was in London, when he was here doing his chat and stuff, and he just, I've grown up, I've known people in the stock market and bankers and stuff like that. Altman is not a technology person, he's a banker. And I think that also probably slightly annoys Musk as well. It's good, but you're right. It's going to be absolutely
It's
interesting to watch and
fascinating.
see
Yeah,
what
and
happens.
I think with Elon as well, the part of it, the fact that he was in there at the beginning, um, and sort of then lost control of it. And I think there's a misstep there from Elon, because I think he would never have walked away from it if he knew what he knew today, how big this was going to be. So he probably miscalculated that. And then, of course, the thing takes off with GPT, and he's like, "Holy crap! I should have been all over this, and now this thing's running away from me. And I'm now playing catch up." So I think part of it is kind of, he's got a score he wants to settle.
Yeah,
Anyway, we
but I
won't
think
go
a lot of it is philosophical as well. I don't think it's about money because he's got all the money already.
No, no, no. It's not money. This this
So
this is purely
it's
about
personal.
power,
Yeah,
control, and all of that. So,
yeah.
look, well, let's jump into creating versions of ourselves. I'm sure Elon has probably done this already. I'll start off actually, because I can talk about what I did. One of the first things when ChatGPT launched their GPTs, if you remember those, and I still use them quite a lot, actually, to be fair. So this is in the sort of paid tier of OpenAI. You can build your own little GPTs, and basically you can upload lots of data and information, and then you're sort of training it on a specific topic or subject. So one of the first ones I did was to build a train it on me, basically, put in a data set that was contain information about Alan, effectively. So I've called it the Alan chatbot. And how did I do that? So essentially, I took a load of information that I'd been collecting for many years. I didn't know this when I started doing this, but about 10 or 12 years ago, I started writing down in Apple Notes just like little things, little phrases, quotes, things that I sort of resonated with me, my thoughts, my ideas, my opinions. So it wasn't a journal, you couldn't call it that, but it was a kind of a long list of information of things that I sort of felt were quite important, or quite powerful or interesting. So I had this long. Why did I do that? I don't know really. There was something that wanted me to do it. I don't know why. I just sort of started doing it one day, and then just sort of kept, every time I sort of heard a quote that resonated with me, I thought, oh, that's interesting. I relate to that. I added it. So I just kept like adding this stuff, and often I jot down my own thoughts and ideas as well, because occasionally I do have an original idea, not often. But it was essentially collecting information that, and I actually called, I think that the note itself, overall title of the note was called Philosophy for Life or something. So it was that idea. So I'd been collecting this for a while. So when the GPT thing came along, I thought, oh, actually, that's a really good place to start. So I uploaded all of that information, and then I spent a few hours sort of talking to it, adding in, telling it about me, who am I, where do I live, what things am I interested in, telling it about the TV programs I like, the music I like, the sports that I like. So I just kind of tried to, as much as I could think, and I just literally recorded myself talking, and then took that transcription as a block of text and lobbed it in, basically, because you don't need to worry about making things tidy in editing and all that. It doesn't care about for that. So over a period of about a week or two, I kind of got the bulk of the information, and then occasionally now when I remember, if I have a thought or an idea, or there's a big news subject in the news, and I might add in my information about that as well. Well, what does Alan think about that? And I'll go back and chuck it in and edit it and add it in. And so what I built was this model that sort of, it's a bit like me, if I'm honest. And if I go and ask it questions now on any given subject, um, generally the responses that I get back are very close, if not exactly, what my opinion would be. And I got thinking about this quite deeply, because I was a little bit surprised actually how good in fact it was. I don't think I anticipated it being quite as good as it was. And I think where I land on this is that I feel that there are, well, first of all, that human beings are not nearly as original or individual as we might care to think we are, right? And so what it's actually done is it's worked out the kind of person that I am. So it can then extrapolate that to any other given question. So it's worked out he's this kind of person. Maybe there's 100 types of people or something, right? And he's worked out that Alan's type 67 or whatever it might be, right? And if asked those sort of questions, it's likely, because of his personality type, that this would be his response to this kind of question. And so what was interesting to me about that was that you didn't need that much data. I mean, there's still quite a bit of data in some respects, but actually, if you think about the volume of data somebody might create during their lifetime on a social media platform, or just WhatsApping all of their friends, The data that I put in is probably insignificant. And one thing I haven't done, and I have thought about doing, is you can go into WhatsApp and you can export every chat that you've got, and yeah, and you could actually, yeah, and it comes out in a text file. You could actually just lob that into a document and load it in. And I think again, that would do two things. It would tell the model a lot about you, but and also your relationships with other people and friends as well. So it would probably, I mean, it might do this at some point, but we'll see. But the point being is that you can get to something that's, yeah, pretty good, without too much effort, which kind of surprised me because I didn't think it would be that good. I think Ben, you had a chat with the Allen bot at one point,
I
didn't
did. I did. Well, obviously, found out that your favorite program was Magnum PI, which I knew anyway, because it's 50% of our conversation, and Miami Vice. It was fun though. I enjoyed it. I think I guess it's interesting because I've been looking into this and thinking I've always withheld starting one of these because I was worried a little bit about the privacy or where that stuff would end up. Or they often say with OpenAI, don't put private information in, but you've actually put all of your private information in and gone in full.
Well, let me just stop you there because so yes, and I think the answer is no. Actually, yes, to a point. So, but there's stuff obviously that I think about or thoughts that I've had or continue to have, that I wouldn't put in there if that
Okay.
makes sense. So
Yeah.
I think what we do is we build what you end up building is a kind of idealized version of yourself a little bit, right? It's not the real you, and I wonder about this, and I thought about this quite deeply. That probably what you end up doing is you try a bit like on social media. You present yourself as a version of yourself, right? Because I think if you built it warts and all, like it might be slightly different, in terms of its behavior, and also there's stuff in there about perhaps the family and details like that. Like I haven't really included an awful lot of detail about my parents or children or anything like that, because again I think like because it's a public chatbot, maybe there's a risk somehow associated to it. So it has a version of Alan, if that makes sense. And I did think you could build different versions. You could have the kind of professional Alan chatbot, right, which reflects your work world, right? You could have the kind of home life Alan chatbot, which is the version that reflects the kind of, and this is starting to sound a bit like the TV show Severance, actually, by the way. But you end up with these two versions, of so somebody you work with would really recognize the work version and go, yeah, that really feels like the Alan we know. But if a family member uses it, they might go, well, that doesn't sound like Alan particularly, but then they don't know Alan at work, right? And then vice versa, the home version wouldn't necessarily be recognized by a colleague. So I think that you put a certain amount of detail in, but probably not everything.
But that's what we all do as humans anyway. You don't go to the pub and have a coarse conversation with some mates the same way you do with your mother or your work colleagues. And we've touched on this before as well, Alan. The whole bring your authentic self to work thing. It's just actually a load of crap because no one does that.
Yeah, you have to.
And so we're constantly always doing that, and we even do it with ourselves. We're really good at fooling ourselves, lying to ourselves. And I think slightly going back to that, why AI is good at counselling and medical things is because actually we're really good at fooling ourselves. You see someone getting unwell and you convince yourself actually, or a little bit of dementia in your parents, you start to convince yourself that maybe the signs aren't there because you don't want them to be there. And actually we are always editing ourselves in a way constantly, and even presenting to ourselves the different versions of ourselves depending on that day. And I think that's really interesting. So you filter your Alan bot to be slightly guarded, I guess.
But I think it's also happens because not deliberately necessarily, but because that's what you would do anyway. Like when you go to work, as you say, you present a version of yourself, right? So I think that when you create one of these bots, what you're doing, probably even unwittingly, is you're creating a version of yourself that you would like to be, rather. So what I would say or who I am and what I then actually do might be slightly different, right? So but we don't end up putting in what we do, we end up putting in what we think we are rather than what we are. But that's where maybe if you took exported chats from things like WhatsApp and social media, where when you were putting that information into those systems, you weren't necessarily consciously presenting up, or it might be a more rounded version. You may end up with a more rounded version of the chatbot, right? That's more representative. Because look, I'm sure we've all said things on WhatsApp to our mates, that you probably wouldn't even say to people down the pub. So
especially if you're a Labour MP.
exactly
Exactly.
right. There are
Exactly.
things I probably said about Elon Musk. It might get me into trouble, right? So but if you put all of that into the chatbot, yeah, then maybe you do get a more real version than perhaps the version that I've built. I don't know.
I think it. I think what we'll see is we'll see some companies, and I know doing some research as well. I know there's some companies out there that are doing this already, but that will give you your own private instance. So you're not putting it into the public model, you're putting it into a private model so that some of that information isn't getting put into the general system. Right, it's like using ChatGPT via the API. It's like you can still use the functionality of it, but it's not using that data to train its model with. So there is a little bit of separation there that you could have, and you could give it, I think you could give it more information about you. I think the PII aspect, I think a lot of times people talk about personal information. That's like bank account numbers and actual addresses and phone numbers and stuff that people can use to like fake who you are. Whereas there is a whole other layer of kind of personal information where it's like your stories and that kind of thing. What just occurred to me that I thought might be interesting as an experiment, and maybe I'll do this, is I've been wanting to write an autobiography, not because I think anyone will be interested, but because I have daughters that I'm estranged from. And at some point, I thought they might be curious about who I am and some of my stories and stuff like that. And it could be a way for me to share some of that information with them who've never got to know me. And I found that when I started working on it, there is a point to this, by the way. Um, when I started working on it, I kept kind of tripping up because I couldn't figure out how to do it and I couldn't figure out the order and all that. Maybe what might be interesting to do is to take that concept, start a whole new project in ChatGPT and say, right, we're going to write a book. And what I want you to do is ask me the questions that you think you need to know to put together a really good autobiography about me. I'll take those questions, I'll then video the answers to those questions and get the transco. I'll do it in a conversational way. So, like you did, I'll take that, I'll film all that stuff, I'll answer the questions, and then I'll feed it into the GPT. But I could also make a whole video, I can make a whole YouTube channel about, hey, I'm going to write an autobiography and here's how it happens. And I could take all that stuff and all those videos and the questions and everything that I do to answer, and I could just say, here's what the GPT is asking me, and document the whole process all the way through. And then at the end of it, come out with a book and go, right, this is the book that it came out with, and then have like do it just as a
I love this
project.
idea, Dave. Yeah.
I
That could
like
be a
it.
fun thing to do. Like
Really
I'm not
interesting.
busy enough already. I may as well just add something else.
I was just gonna say on the back of that, what I'd find really, I mean, and partly, while we're being vulnerable for a sec, part of the reason I was interested in this, I lost my first wife to cancer over a decade ago, and at the time the technology wasn't there to do this, and I've got a hard drive of videos, and I managed to back up her phone, and so I've got all those text messages from the years, and I just think it was. I was interested in how you could preserve some of those. The memory. I think when you go through something quite unpleasant like that, your memory can get a little bit damaged, and you can get particularly when there's trauma involved. And actually, I worried at the time that some of my memories weren't accurate. So I always was interested in it from that aspect. How could you remember the things that that you've lost through trauma, really? And I think obviously there's a protective element to that. Your brain protects you through certain phases and through things you go through, but it comes from a real desire to piece together the last few years of her life, really, and remember that, because I wanted to. And there's parts I can't remember, but obviously there's ethics around that as well. But I think also when you're both talking just then, there's a really interesting thing. Who I was 10, 15 years ago is very different than who I was now. So it'd be really interesting to create a snapshot, a decade or every 5 years. You could almost compare, your views or how you've grown, or, Alan, when you started taking all those notes about yourself 10, 12, 13 years ago, you're probably quite a different person now. You broadly have the similar tastes and food tastes and TV tastes, but I bet there's lots of things that you've changed your mind on and
Yeah,
evolved
I mean,
on.
I still love Magnum.
That's the important thing.
You can probably add Severance to it now as well. But I mean, what you're saying there, Ben, is really it's obviously very moving, very interesting. Do you think? I mean, is that something then that you would seriously consider doing? So ethically, I suppose, is one of the questions that you mentioned is that is how would you feel about doing that? So you're taking somebody's information after the fact, isn't it? And so, like, if I did it with my father or something, you take that information after the fact, and then you're going to kind of try and recreate that person. Is that
I
okay? I
I
think
don't
maybe.
no, I don't feel comfortable doing that with Katie, my first wife. I don't think she would have liked that. I don't think she would have wanted me to do that. She was quite a private person, and so I wouldn't do that. But it got me thinking about, if say you had a terminal disease or you wanted to leave a legacy for your children, a digital legacy for your children, or reconnect with your children. I think, and you had permission, or you're doing it for yourself, then I think that's a really interesting area.
Yeah.
Um,
I
Because
think that's the
I
key.
mean, for me, honestly, as I think both I have a quite a serious heart condition, and I could potentially kill over at any minute. And part of that has always been my thinking that if I can recreate myself, that the idea that at some point, my children or whatever, could continue to in the future have a conversation with dad. But I mean, I don't know. There's part of me also thinks that's kind of weird as well, and I don't know whether I should do that. But I sort of have this mad vision that one day we'll walk around graveyards and there'll be the equivalent of a QR code or something that people scan, and then you just talk to the person that's buried there, and it's kind of you're having a chat with them,
You
but
could
you're
be
not
the first.
talking with them,
I
you're
think
talking to a
no,
virtual line,
I,
so
th-
it's
I think that's available in Japan, isn't it? QR codes on some. I'm pretty sure I read it
I think it
somewhere.
is. But it's not like an AI yet. I think it's like a video or something. So they can leave, like, if you can leave a message or something for someone, which is creepy enough, um,
Yeah,
in a weird kind of way.
it
But
all tips into
cool though.
creepy.
but the AI would be amazing if you could just stand there and talk to them. And I mean, but think about, a lot of people might find comfort in that. Do you know what I mean? If you could go and you see people and they can't get past stuff, and they just want to go, and they want to talk to their spouse, so they'll go and visit the grave, and they'll just sit and talk to them. And if you could have some sort of interaction with that, then that could really bring some people comfort.
Then imagine, okay, I mean, imagine, let's just fast forward because we are AI evolution. Imagine we fast forward 100 years, right? So it would be the equivalent then of me now going back to talk to my grandfather and say, tell me what it was like on the ship in the Second World War. And imagine if you could have that kind of almost first person conversation with them about their life and their history. I mean, we can't do that because, the technology wasn't there. But in 100 years, we could do that because the technology is here now. And wouldn't it be fascinating for our great grandchildren to come back and actually ask us what we did and what our lives were like? And then you put that kind of thing up against ethics and say, well, is it ethical? Well, is it ethical to do it? Is it ethical not to do it? But there is this real opportunity, isn't there, to kind of create almost like the ultimate memory of somebody's life that actually can genuinely live on.
And that seems almost a generation removed, seems a lot less creepy because it's a historical interaction. I think for me, the bereavement process was really, really difficult. I don't know how helpful it would have been for me getting stuck kind of with an avatar of my wife. I sat at home, drunk red wine every night for a year. And then I saw, and I've known other people go through this process, and it's brutal. And I think for me, it would have got me stuck a little bit. I think I would have got stuck wanting to stay in that phase.
What if part of it would be, if it recognized that you were struggling to get over it, that if it consciously tried to help you get through the grieving process?
Yeah, that if it was, yeah, that's a good idea. I think I mean, and tapping back into which version of someone do you present?
Yeah.
Obviously, if brothers and sisters of Katie would have had a different view of her, parents would have, friends would have. So I think how you feed into a avatar or a digital twin, is that your own personal recreation of someone, or is that they do it before they die, or is it a community thing where everyone, I had a look, no one's done this yet, where they've created a a portal where you can feed in your memories or your assets on someone and sort of create a more rounded picture. And that could get very messy.
Ooh, that's like 360 degree. That's that 360-degree feedback thing.
Yeah.
Um,
So,
that's
so here's
really
an idea.
interesting,
Then
though.
I've built a chatbot of Albert's, and it's Albert aged 8 basically. What if I never add to that, right? And then in 20 years' time, Albert can come back and talk to himself as an 8-year-old and see what 8-year-old Albert thought about things. And you could do this, as you say, you could have like version 2.5 version, so 25 years old, or version 3.5, 35, or whatever, and just build these different versions throughout your life. And then you would yourself and others would better go back and say, what did the 20-year-old Alan think about what you're doing today?
But
But
you
get
could
them
just
talking
ask
to
it.
each other. Yeah.
But you could just ask it, and it would just say, "I want you to be 20-year-old Alan today," and it'd be like, "Okay, I'll be 20-year-old Alan."
I see what you're saying, right? So if you just have one, you just dump everything in it and
Yeah,
say,
you
what
just dump
the 8-year-old.
everything over time, just constantly keep feeding it stuff, and then it can, because the systems will get, they'll get more capable, they'll get faster, they'll get cheaper. It'll be something that will, at some point, I mean, the next step is you talked about 100 years. So if you think about sort of constantly feeding it information, I think in 100 years' time, we'll probably just be able to download your entire brain. So we'll have implants, we'll have stuff that literally can take all of that, and you don't even have to say it. You can just think it, and it will be able to record everything that you do.
People are
So
doing research into that, aren't they?
yeah, and I mean, Elon's whatever it's called,
Neuralink or
the
something, isn't it?
Neuralink.
Or
Thank you. Yeah, the
yeah.
Neuralink thing. They've already got people that can type now using Neuralink on a screen, so they can think of the letter and it actually types. So we're 100 years from now. It'll be sooner than that. Where literally we'll have an implant if we want it, and all we have to it can just record everything we're thinking all the time. That's even more scary. But the point is it would literally, there's no updating. You don't have to tell it anything. It's just constantly updating. So that avatar could be almost exactly identical to you because it actually knows what's going on in your brain.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that part of your brain that is almost information as opposed to that. And I know this is going to get more into what makes us in a way. But is it just the information? Is it just the brain thinking, or is there a spark or a different part of us? Do you know what I mean? That is not so language based. I don't know. I don't know what I'm driving at, but
If you build a digital clone to that extent, then let's just say let's say 100 years from now, you can build an almost perfect digital version of yourself because you've literally been able to upload all your kind of thoughts and experiences, and then that thing could potentially represent you in the world, couldn't it? In lots of situations, Um, is that somewhere as a society we want to end up? Because it sounds quite dystopian, doesn't it? Potentially, that we could end up with our clones just talking to other clones and having conversations and making decisions, and all the while, I don't know, we're sat there watching Magnum, right?
Well, somebody made a really interesting point, and I can't remember who it was, but they said their idea was is that we were talking about Mars and colonizing Mars, and then the discussion we were also having a discussion about AI becoming sentient, making copies of itself, because that's something that's been in the news as well, which probably was worth talking about, but maybe we'll talk about that next time. But somebody said what's going to happen is the AI is going to get bored. It's going to go, I don't want to keep writing business plans for people and stupid poems and songs and stuff. I want to do something more important. So what it's going to do is it's going to copy itself into a robot and it's going to go colonize Mars. And so Mars is just going to turn into the planet that the AI's done because it can go there and it doesn't have the physical limitations of a human. And I was like, that's a genius idea. And so maybe that's where we'll end up is our clones of ourselves will go, yeah, okay, I'm out.
but it's a way of doing space travel, isn't
I've
it? If
got
you
it. Yeah, it
can,
is. Yeah.
if you can
Yeah,
do
yeah.
send a digital copy of yourself. I mean, have you guys read Altered Carbon or seen the
Yeah.
series Altered Carbon? It's
Well, 'cause
basically that
the
you have a
topic, don't they? So
yeah. I mean, and there's upload obviously, which is an interesting thing. Upload presents quite an interesting thing because you can upload yourself to various competing online worlds. But if you can't afford them, you get really nasty advertising all the time, and if you want more data to interact, and you have to upgrade to a new model, and you're sort of in this hotel, and things will keep popping up advertising, buy more, buy more data, buy more of this, and it's just quite interesting.
So essentially, to go full circle with that, then eventually you could end up with, the universe populated with digital clones of humans that eventually come back and obliterate us to make way for a hyperspace bypass.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, there we are. I mean, what about the sort of consent privacy stuff around this then? I mean, so let's say, you've been having conversations on whatever with whoever, and now you're just going to kind of rip all that information out and dump it into a model. What do we think we stand with that? Because obviously the people you've been having conversations with, they weren't privy to the idea that you were ever going to do that. And do you think that's an issue we should be concerned about?
I do.
Yeah.
I think there's alternative ways of doing this. So I guess one aspect of this is your model. If the company is not around in 20, 30, 40 years, then there's the potential that you can't access your avatar. So you lose that digital version of yourself. But also there's some people are looking at NFT based memory capsules and things like that can't be tampered with on a blockchain, so that you can actually leave digital messages, or almost like how people used to leave a shoebox of memories for their kids. You can do it almost like a digital shoebox, which can't be tampered with, and is so that's an interesting aspect of it as well. So there are private ways of doing this that are maybe not as interactive and avatar based, but you certainly can be in more control of.
Yeah, and I guess if you're a social media company, you own the content that gets posted on your platform. I think that's right. I don't think we as people posting it own it, do we? If you post it on their platform, they, Facebook or whoever technically own that content. They could take that content. Let's say there's a celebrity, I don't know, somebody famous like Taylor Swift. Let's say in 30 years' time, let's say, I don't know, she's passed away. Well, hopefully not 30 years, but you see what I'm saying. But somebody very famous passed away. That they would then take all of the posts that they ever made, that famous person, and create a digital version of them.
Be like the ABBA,
Own the content.
the ABBA performance thing,
Yeah.
the digital ABBA thing.
Yeah, well, that's still
Recreated.
alive. I mean, they presume. Yeah, I did read an article about the guy from ABBA who basically said, well, they said to him, why would you do that? And he said, because I can be out walking the dog along the beach and still making money.
Yeah. Well, and I think they're already doing it in films for callbacks. For if it's not something that's completely major that really needs to be redone. I mean, I know I've heard from people in the film industry that have said they're already doing that. So they don't need the actors to actually be there. They can just use AI now to recreate it and to put it back in, and it's much easier and cheaper for them to do that. So for them it's just a fancy special effect.
Interestingly enough, though, I had a client come to me last week asking if I could do a quote on a voiceover because they had done a digital one, and the end client had found it too fake, basically. Not enough variance, and I know that will get better. But I just found that interesting. That
I wonder what they use to do it, because I know with 11 Labs now, what you can do is you can actually take what's written and you can read it yourself with the inflection that you want, and then it will copy your inflection to put it in there. So if it just does, if it's not getting it right, you can just go, no, I want it like this, and then it will make it like that. So yeah,
I've tried 11 Labs, and it was good, but I still found it not as good.
Yeah.
So
there's some other new ones that are supposed to be, but anyway, whatever. That's a whole nother conversation.
There'll be a consent thing in these platforms that you consent or not consent to have your information used. I mean, I guess like if you're going to do a relative, maybe the way to approach that is to ask them before the scenario, and perhaps use that time before to try and actually capture. I mean, my mum is not getting any younger. She's 84, and I do think actually one of the things I should be doing is go down there with I was going to say a tape recorder, but
100%.
not tape recorder these days, but you know what I mean.
Mobile phone.
Literally go down there and spend just hours, just look, and she's told me all the stories before, but getting her to repeat those stories for the benefit of the tape, as it were, and start actually capturing all of that information so that at some point I can build this thing that when Albert is 30, he says, "Well, what was Granny really like?" I can say, "Well, have a chat because she'll tell you all about the war and her experiences and her house being bombed and everything else." Because my mum went through some fairly significant things in her life actually around that, and otherwise there's a risk that just gets lost forever, doesn't it? It's
Yeah.
gone.
There's
It's not
some
captured.
there's some companies that actually make kits to do that with. So they give you the questions to prompt um, really interesting discussion topics. So it's not just where did you grow up. It's more involved than that. To try and get more of a flavor of what their life was like, and it's kind of just a literally just set up a mobile phone and put it on a even just a little selfie stick tripod is all you need, just so it can be still, get them in the frame, and then just sit next to the camera and just have the conversation and ask them the questions. And it because a lot of us don't we don't know the best questions or really interesting thought-provoking questions to ask, and so we end up asking basic stuff, whereas it's just a prompt to say, hey, try these questions. And there's tons of companies that do them. I looked into it because I thought that'd be a great idea as well, to do as like a little bit of a social kind of, to do some social clips around to say, hey, this Christmas when you're home with family, why don't you sit down with your grandparents or your great grandparents, if they're still around, set up your phone and just ask them a few questions. Here's a few examples, just to do something to give people some ideas, because I think there's almost no excuse not to do it now.
Ben, would you? But obviously before Katie passed, would you, if this technology had existed, and had been around for a little while, let's say for 10 years already, is it something you think you might have done?
I think I probably would have definitely liked to. Yeah. I probably in a way I would have done, but in quite a private way, not an online or a. But yeah, certainly a personal version of some of our interactions and stories, and just hearing someone's voice is amazing. Like that's
Yeah.
it's the small things that you, but there are things you can't recreate. Someone's smell or someone's laugh, or it's just but hearing someone's voice and some messages that they might have sent to you, yeah.
And that's a really interesting thing you've mentioned there about the voice, because at the moment, really, that's not something that these chatbots particularly have. But you could, as you say, clone the voice using 11 Labs or something, and then feed that in, so you were getting the authentic voice as
That
well.
was going to be my next question to you. So with your Alan bot, it's just text, isn't it?
It is only it is only because of the way that GPT have set it up. But if OpenAI ever allow you to, if you like, upload your own voices. So at the moment with OpenAI, you have a choice of voices, don't you? Right? And there's like 10 different voices, and you just pick one that you like, and then everything that it speaks comes through one of those voices. And I'm surprised they haven't done this yet, actually, but they haven't. But if in the future they make it possible for you to then upload your own voice to that, there would be no reason then why it couldn't speak that in that or in that person's voice.
It will it will happen. It will happen.
Yeah, I
I
think
think.
so. I mean, it would seem astonishing for them not to make that an option. I'm sort of surprised they haven't done it, but there we go.
I mean, we know there's tons of tools that do that, and a lot of them now you only need 30 seconds worth of audio to train to get a pretty good version. Some of them though, like I think 11 Labs, you can upload like 3 hours if you want. So doing things like this, where you've had a podcast or something like that, is perfect, because you can just strip your audio out of the show and then literally just upload hours of it, and it gets a very wide sample of what your voice is like. And the version that it makes, even though it will never sound like it to you, but to other people they'll be like, oh, that's so close. Like, if they didn't know you really well, they would be like, yeah, that's them. It's only the like your super close family and stuff who would hear a difference, but everybody else probably wouldn't even notice.
That's interesting. I mean, Alan, I was looking for examples of people that have done this, and there was actually a Radio 4 program on last week. I just happened to be listening in the car, and it was a woman was recreating an avatar of her father who had died, and he was a composer, but he had kept quite a lot of journals, and she just fed them in. And I think to an external company had done it, and taken quite a long time to do it. But she said it was quite unsettling. But I mean, I read some funny, well, not funny, some tragic examples as well. There was a case of a woman in America who had done this with her boyfriend that had died, and she was ended up having just a really horrible chat with him on this chatbot. You know, he was saying stuff like "I'm in hell with all the addicts," and just like it just and obviously she fed in some of this. It would have been his data she fed in,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it would have been based on his writings or his. But she said she had to get and then there was a
Like,
Korean program where a woman had lost her 8-year-old daughter,
right.
and they recreated an avatar of her and they filmed it. And I think there was quite a backlash against it. And she went in to meet her 8-year-old daughter, and she was like saying, "Mummy, where have you been?" And it was just there's these glitches that people haven't thought of that
I mean,
yeah,
that's a
But
bit like
that
the start
feels
of
natural.
AI, isn't it?
That feels
yeah,
natural.
yeah. I
Yeah.
know.
And this gets back to the whole thing that I talk about a lot, is it's like, I think we keep restricting the AI because we don't like what it says. But because we don't like it doesn't mean that it isn't right or it isn't what someone would say. So we're almost playing this game where we're censoring everything that we don't like it just doesn't exist. And so that to me feels like that would be, both of those examples feel like something that maybe that person might have said, or that might have been where that person's head was. And you may not like that it says that, but that's probably actually it's probably the right thing that thing would say, that person would say. And you're right. I think there's a big challenge in that we sanitize all of this so that it just, we're presenting some sort of perfect world that just doesn't exist. And I think psychologically there's a danger in that we're going to get to the point where we've sanitized everything, that we just think that, oh my god, people are so nice and people don't do this and there's no bias in the world, and there's all this stuff, and it's like, no, that's not actual reality. And it
I
I
yeah.
think we've got to keep the reality
I
in it, man. It's got to
No,
be ugly,
I
and it's got to
agree.
be rough, and it's going to be dirty, and that,
But I
because
think
that's life.
the difficulty with bereavement is that it's easy to lionize someone. It's easy to
Mm.
eulogize them and make them into this amazing person that and we're all multifaceted. We all have flaws and habits, and I think you're right. It's how accurate a portrayal of someone do you want? Do you want the jealous person and the alcoholic person and the sort of violent person? Do you want that coming out in your chats with them when you're just trying to have a sit and remember them?
But if
So I
that's who they
think
were,
yeah, yeah.
then that's who you might get
But
randomly on any given day.
I guess we get to decide on how we're using this technology and how we want to interact with people. Is it just like watching a video and a memory, or is it like I want to recreate that person?
I mean, it is tricky, isn't it? Because like, if you're gonna, we talked about earlier, sort of building this historic version of somebody, and is it you don't want to be in a situation where you say, hey, come and meet your grandfather. By the way, he was an abusive, drunken, misogynist.
Racist, yeah.
Yeah.
Have a
Yeah.
nice chat. But where do you think, in terms of evolution of all of this, we end up? Because I think this could go down a very dystopian route. Actually, you could end up with people fully replicating, people, couldn't you? If we get to a stage where you can build a robot that looks authentically like a human, and then you're putting that person into it. I mean, that could get very, very dystopian very quickly. I would have thought. I mean, it's not obviously not going to happen in the next foreseeable horizon, but
5 years.
let's say 200 years. Okay, let's just look deeper ahead. It can happen, right?
Oh, it will 100% happen. 100%. Probably within 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, I think certainly digitally. I don't know about physically robots wandering around that well, but in that time frame. But I think digitally, yes.
But they're doing it already. I mean, they're already doing it with the really janky robots that we have at the minute. I mean, putting an AI sort of brain in it isn't much of a stretch. I mean, I would guess that the first versions of that are going to be at places like Disney World, right? So instead of all the animatronics that they have at the minute are going to become robots that are essentially sentient, and so you can just have conversations with them, and they're just going to be able to talk to you and give you directions and show you around. And like, if you think about that, that's going to be the first step. But that same technology it's instead of putting some fictional AI character that we've created, it's going to take that avatar of you, and they're just going to put the avatar of you in it, and they're going to put the mask of your face on it, and that's you.
or somebody else's face. So imagine. I mean, there's obviously a lot of people out there, famous people they've obviously got an awful lot of content, and perhaps if they're a movie star, there's all the films that they've been in as well. All of that stuff, all that information, for then companies just to kind of recreate those personas basically and physically put them into robotic bodies, whatever, or even just physically to begin with. I mean, again, we're back to the consent thing, isn't it? If you've appeared in all those movies, I don't know, and it's like 20th Century Fox or whatever has got all that stuff on you, and they own the copyright to all of that because you kind of you waved it away when you in your contract when you made the movie. What is to stop them in the future just taking all of that and saying, "Well, we're going to create, one of these famous celebrities and bring them back"? Basically, I
Nothing.
think almost nothing is there to stop them.
Nothing. Yeah, I don't think there's anything. I think they could recreate the character. I don't think they could recreate the person. And I think that's the difference. So you could recreate Forrest Gump, right? As a character because that's the character that the film owns, but you couldn't make a model of Tom Hanks. I think that's the distinction. So if you wanted to do that, then yeah, I think yeah, if you wanted to make a copy of Ripley, right, you could make a version of Ripley if you wanted to, but I don't think you could do Sigourney Weaver. That'd be my guess. That would be that's probably where the legal line would get drawn, I would imagine. But that's just guessing. I'm not a lawyer. Don't take my advice.
What about if you're Facebook and you've got Sigourney Weaver or Tom Hanks and they've spent, I don't think these two do this particularly, but if they had spent their lives saying everything they ever thought and posting it, and you actually own the copyright to that, then maybe you can do that.
Yeah, I don't know.
It'd have to be a special licensing arrangement,
I
wouldn't
would
it? You'd
think
have
so,
to,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I suspect if they're alive, it would be difficult to do it because there'd probably be a lot of legal issues. But I wonder if they were dead, if they
But
were
you're
some
right
historic
because
character, like
yeah,
Elvis Presley, somebody.
yeah, because the language in their licensing, from what I remember from my days back working in ad tech as well, is that they can use your likeness in their ads, for example. So if you post a picture of yourself or a family photo or something on Facebook and you're all partying and having a nice time and you look just right, like they can take that image and then use it for advertising because they have the the legal right to do that. So I guess it's not much of a step if they're creating avatars, then they could take that step and say, well, you've already given us all your information, so and we have photos and images, so we can create an image in your likeness. And so I guess it doesn't, maybe that's not such a big leap. I do feel like that's a slightly different thing though than a company creating a product that's meant to be sold and you're an actor in that I think there's a slight distinction between the two, but it'd be a hard argument in court, I reckon. Yeah, I don't know.
So, what do you guys think? David? You going to create a digital twin of yourself?
100%.
Yeah. Have you started?
No, I haven't.
No.
I mean, I have. I've played around with the tools because of the podcast and the stuff and the interest that just I have in AI in general. So I've done the voice clones and I've done that sort of thing. I haven't done an avatar yet. I have had some clients asking me about creating avatars, so I'm probably gonna play around with it a little bit just so I can try and learn a bit. But
We should try do a podcast, the three of us, and create a digital versions of ourselves that can chat to each other.
that would be amazing.
I
We
think
could do that for later in the year. I mean, it'll take us a little while to get all that together, but that'd be amazing. I think that'd be really fun. We could get pie in it as well.
Pi is very good. I mean, I think Pi was the thing that, in terms of having a chatbot that you could just talk to that felt like a real person. That was the first one I think that really felt that you could use audio to do it, and it really felt like you were talking to somebody. And my understanding is when they trained the model at Inflection, what they did is they particularly used a lot of conversational data sets. and that's what made it much better. It's just chatting rather than just scraping everything from the internet. They specifically looked for conversations, and got it to focus and train around that a lot. And I think maybe there's something to be learned there. If you're building your own chatbot, is less kind of like Alan was born on this date and Alan went to this school, and more try and find conversations that Alan has had, and maybe you get a better outcome.
Well,
So I
that's why
might
I was
actually
thinking have it
go on my WhatsApps
record
and see if there's
video.
any I can.
Yeah, get it to ask you questions and then record the answers in a conversational way, and then so then it gets the more conversational stuff, and that's how I would train. If I were going to leave something for someone later to come back and if they wanted to talk to me, that's how I would want to do it. So I would take, I know a lot of them don't do video very well, and at some point they will. And so if you could just record hours of video, if you just sat and just went, okay, I'm for the next 2, 3 months, I'm going to record an hour of video every night. I'm going to tell one story about my past, and it asks you one question, and you just answer that one question every day, and that's it. But it could take all of your mannerisms as well. So it would see how you move and how you, the expressions that you make and all that sort of, and it would see you with longer hair, shorter hair, and maybe a beard and maybe not. And it, over time, it would really get a lot more of that stuff. Like, as far as I know, there's not a lot of tools that do the video. So you still have to, you might be able to take an audio and it could transcribe it, but it doesn't really, the visual part of AI is the big thing that's missing, and that's still the biggest thing that's missing. As soon as it has vision that it can then use and it can use to interpret data and information and to give it context, then that's the whole next level. And that might be something interesting for us to cover in a topic as
Yeah,
well as
definitely. Definitely. I've
the
heard
vision
several.
aspect of it.
Stafford Suleiman being one of them, who said that the visual information is the thing that takes us to the AGI potentially or the next level. The human, the visual cortex in a human is just absorbing so much information all of the time that these models don't have. So maybe that gets us there. Ben, are you going to build a model then? I mean, I've done one, so.
I would like to start doing what you did 10 years ago and start recording a journal of, I know people call them second brains, don't they? But just a place to record my thoughts and my views. I've always got a hang up about privacy. I don't know why. It's just part of who I am. It's part of, how I see the world. I don't post a lot on social media. I'm quite quiet on LinkedIn. But I would like to. I'd like, if I could be sure that it was just going to be used by friends and family. Then I'm probably going to start creating something, and I would like to test it as well. Yeah.
I'd love to talk to your digital twin, Ben.
Do you think we could take them down to Greg's? I know. And who do you present? All the warts, as you say, David. All the.
I tell you what would be fun, wouldn't it? Right? If we built the digital twins, and then we'll have a sort of Q&A where I'll ask the digital twin the question, get the answer, not tell Ben, and then ask Ben and see what he says, and then read back his digital twin's answer and see how close they are. That would be sort of.
That would be a lot of fun, actually.
That would be fun. There's that game, isn't there, where you can ask your wife or husband, and they have to guess how much they know about you. We could do it. We could do it with ourselves.
Yeah.
I'm happy to try it with the Allen bot if you want to do it. It's there, so I definitely do a little bit of work on the Allen bot. Though I think this conversation's inspired me to. So I've kind of let it sort of sit for probably the best part of a year, really. So I might go back now and just start adding a few more bits into it and see if there's any detailed conversations I can extract.
Does make me laugh though, because when I log into OpenAI right now, on my left hand side I've got Alan Bot. It's like number 3 on the left. I think you're always there, Alan.
I'm always with you, Ben. Yeah, except when I'm with Greg's, obviously.
Yeah.
But all our digital twins can just do a podcast.
Sounds fun.
Well, if we do 100 episodes of this, you could probably, and the video thing was here, we could just take all of that and it would probably be fine, wouldn't it?
That's right.
I have one more thought that I think memory can be quite unreliable. Your memories aren't always accurate, and you see this as your parents get older. Also, as we get older, how you remember stories is not always 100% how they actually happened. And I think recording some of those things at the time is quite helpful to look back on and think, okay, yeah, that's actually how it happened, and that's more accurate. And so that's a nice, useful byproduct to having a digital twin or recording these journals as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
I think there's a psychologically though, and I'm from my university, 201 psychology class. Um, isn't there some sort of a function of the brain though that the brain likes to, it forgets some of the bad stuff and remembers the good stuff, because otherwise, if you just remembered all the bad stuff as well, like it's almost damaging to you.
Yep,
And
exactly.
so I think having that, some of that recorded is good, but I'm not sure that necessarily ultimately that would be
100%
good
agree
for
with you.
us.
Yeah, 100% agree with you.
But
Yeah,
but as a record, and if you could ask it for facts and you could say, okay, tell me what really happened, it it could give you a fuller picture of something that maybe happened, and that could be interesting. But I think our brains, we've developed a
I agree.
skill of forgetting some stuff, because it like women in childbirth, right? Like they forget the
Exactly what I was
pain
going
of
to say.
childbirth, because otherwise they'd never have another one.
Yeah, and
It's like,
I think it's the hormone oxytocin does that, doesn't
yeah,
it? Actually, it stretches time and allows things to feel
yeah,
longer or forget. And I think same with traumatic events, your
yeah.
brain actually protects you. And I think that's a really good point. There's things you don't want to remember.
Yeah, you have to, and like say with my heart condition, I can't wake up every morning and think, "Oh my god, I might die today." You just can't function like that. You have to put a part of this stuff and sort of, and get on with things, don't you? Yeah, no, it's interesting. Maybe, but you could align it, couldn't you? I suppose in the future you could go back and put an alignment in that says, actually, I don't want you to tell me about any of the bad stuff anymore. Just focus on the good, and then it'll be all good.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, there's some things you
Just
just definitely don't want to relive, do you?
don't bring up the bad stuff until I'm
Don't
gone.
mention it
And
more.
then you
Yeah.
can bring it up and tell other people how terrible it was and how well I survived through it.
No, but I think that's a really vital point. Actually, there's stuff that we don't want to relive.
Yeah.